Marcos Garcia is the owner of a small car shop in a quiet corner of the town. His shop is operated by just one mechanic, who is also his only employee. Recently, a mechanic received a car from a customer who needed repairs on the vehicle. Ever since the car arrived, strange things have been happening around the shop. Both Marcos and the mechanic feel that there is something mysterious about the car, but they cannot explain what it is. The car sits in the garage like any other vehicle that needs repairs, but there is something about it that sends shivers down their spines. It's as if the car is alive and it's watching them. The two men try to ignore the feeling, and they carry on with their daily work. One day, Marcos is watching over the shop through the security camera when he notices something strange. The old mechanic is moving in such a way that it makes Marcos feel very unsettled. But when Marcos asks him what he is doing, the mechanic replies that he is talking to the client who had dropped off the car. Marcos finds this very unusual, and he decides to take a closer look. He watches the video, and he sees something that chills him to the bone. In the video, the mechanic is talking to someone, but there is no one else in the room. Marcos can't believe what he is seeing. He immediately calls the mechanic to ask what is going on. To his shock, the mechanic replies that Carlos, the client who had dropped off the car days ago, was visiting him to discuss details about his car and a racing accident that occurred the night before. Marcos is chilled to his core. Hearing him mention the racing accident from last night is beyond strange. As it turns out, Carlos had passed away in a terrible street racing accident the night before. The mechanic had not been aware of this incident until recently. The question is, how did he come to learn about this news? Marcos can't shake off the feeling that something supernatural is happening. He starts to believe that the car is responsible for the strange events. He wonders if the car is haunted or if the mechanic is simply becoming unhinged from working too much. He decides to investigate further. He sets up cameras around the shop to catch any unusual activity. Over the next few days, he reviews the footage, and he sees some very strange things. He sees shadows moving across the walls, doors opening and closing on their own, and strange noises coming from the car. Marcos starts to feel like he's losing his mind. He can't explain the strange occurrences, and he's afraid of what might happen next. He decides to call in a paranormal investigator to help him solve the mystery. The investigator comes to the shop and sets up equipment to detect any paranormal activity. As they walk around the shop, they feel a cold breeze and they hear strange noises. They move closer to the car and the equipment starts to beep. They realize that there is something inside the car and it's not human. The investigator tells Marcos that the car is possessed by a demon. The demon is angry and vengeful, and it wants to hurt anyone who comes near it. Marcos is terrified. He realizes that he has to get rid of the car before it's too late. He contacts a priest, who comes to the shop and performs an exorcism on the car. The priest prays and sprinkles holy water on the car. The demon screams and howls, but eventually it leaves the car. Marcos feels a sense of relief. He can finally breathe again. As the demon leaves the car, a cloud of darkness dissipates, and the atmosphere in the shop feels lighter. Marcos thanks the priest for his help, and together they watch as the car returns to its dormant state. However, their relief is short-lived. The priest warns Marcos that the demon might still linger in the area, seeking another vessel or looking for revenge. He advises Marcos to take precautionary measures and keep a close eye on any unusual occurrences. Over the next few days, Marcos remains vigilant, but nothing out of the ordinary happens. The shop returns to its peaceful state, and Marcos begins to think that perhaps the ordeal is finally over. He decides to sell the car, not wanting to risk anyone else falling prey to its sinister influence. A few weeks later, a couple named Sarah and David express interest in purchasing the car. Marcos hesitates, at first unsure if he should disclose its dark past. but ultimately decides to be honest with them. He tells them about the demon possession and the exorcism, urging them to think twice before making a decision. Surprisingly, Sarah and David are undeterred by the revelation. They admit that they have an interest in paranormal investigations and have been looking for a haunted object to study. They are thrilled by the opportunity and insist on purchasing the car. Marcos, conflicted, warns them once more about the potential danger but ultimately agrees to sell it to them. After signing the paperwork, Sarah and David drive off in their newly acquired possessed car, excitement gleaming in their eyes. Unbeknownst to Marcos, Sarah and David are not as innocent as they appear. In reality, they are members of a secret society that seeks out paranormal artifacts and harnesses their powers for their own sinister purposes. As they drive away, Sarah speaks softly to the car, her voice filled with anticipation. "Finally, we found you," she whispers. The car seems to respond, emitting a low, ominous growl. Back at the shop, Marcos watches their departure, a sense of unease settling within him. He can't help but worry about what Sarah and David will unleash with their newfound possession. But for now, all he can do is hope that they are prepared for the consequences of their actions and that the darkness within the car will not consume them entirely. As the car disappears from sight, the quiet corner of the town once again falls into a seemingly peaceful slumber, unaware of the malevolent force that has been unleashed upon it. The true extent of the car's power and the fate of Sarah, David, and the town itself remain uncertain, leaving the door open for a new chapter in this chilling tale of mystery and darkness.